Well, good evening. Welcome to Writing for Peace Sunday Live. And tonight, really excited to have poet Cynthia Atkins here. And I'll begin by reading a short bio. Cynthia Atkins was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois, receiving a BFA and an MA from the University of Illinois and an MFA from Columbia University School of the Arts. She is the author of Psychic Weathers and In the Event of Full Disclosure, with themes of mental illness, wellness, and family life. Her poems have appeared in numerous journals, including Alaska Quarterly Review, American Letters and Commentary, Bomb, Del Sol Review, Florida Review, Green Mountain Review, The Journal, North American Review, and others. Poems by her were nominated for a 2011 Pushcart Prize. Her awards and honors include the New Voice Award, as well as the residencies from the Virginia Center for Creative Arts and Breadloaf Writers Conference. Formerly, Atkins worked as assistant director for the Poetry Society of America. She's taught English and creative writing at various colleges, including Sweetbriar College, Hollins University, James Madison University, and Roanoke College. For 8 years, she was founder and artistic director of writers at Jordan House Fair. She is currently assistant professor of English at Virginia Western Community College and a newly minted associate poetry editor for Mad Hat Lit. Atkins is also a visual artist and currently lives on the Maury River of Rockbridge County, Virginia, with artist Philip Welch and their family. Welcome, Cynthia. It's great to see you.
Welcome. Thank you for inviting me here tonight.
Great. Well, I'm excited. I like to begin with a kind of a question I ask everyone who appears here, and that's what book or poem or essay changed everything for you as a young person?
When I was in second grade, my teacher read us Charlotte's Web after lunch every day. We'd have our sandwiches and come back and get our magic carpets, which were little, pieces of carpeting. We'd sit on our carpets and she would read to us from Charlotte's Web. And I think that was listening to her read the way she read it. That was like my first inkling of, wow, I really love words. And every, white makes you feel like you're right there, in the trough. And that was my moment of understanding language was something that made me sit up and enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything thematically about that book that moved you especially, or?
Well, the connections, of course, between these friends. Kind of maybe it was my first initiation into made families. Finding family through various other routes, the connection that you have, the loss. I mean, that book has everything in terms of theme, right?
Yeah.
Loss, love.
Just the big stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I'd love to have you start to read. What do you have planned to read tonight?
Well, my new book is out. It was out March 11th, which was the day the world closed down, COVID-19, and it's called Still Life with God. One of the themes in this book, which I was going to preach to the world, was feeling that our culture has an illness, and the illness is what's become of social media, that I feel like it's an addiction of our culture, and we haven't reckoned with it. We all just kind of jumped in to this world, not really looking at, what it's doing to us, how we perceive ourselves, what our spiritual life is with all these layers. You wake up in the morning and you know what kind of muffin a judge had. Where I'm old enough to remember my writing life pre-internet. I'm that old. And it was a very different feeling, right, being a writer, in that sense of self was easier to get to.
Mm.
Now when I write, I feel like there is a lot of layers, hundreds of people that I've never met that I'm in contact with through the internet. It's a weird thing. And because I'm a poet, I've looked at it through my book. If I was a sociologist, I'd probably be looking at it through that lens. But it was ironic because I was about to preach to the world these themes. And the day the world closed down, we became ever more dependent on these screens for everything we do. So I guess I feel like I can still preach that we need to look at it, look at who we are and what we are in this context of many people, many selves. I myself am immersed, with the book out. You really can't put the genie back in the bottle. So that's one of the things I was looking at in this book. Cover art, Lisa Telling Kattenbraker, and it's a little kind of magical batik. So I'll start to read. I thought God was a very risky title for my book. I'm not a real religious person. I'm not a Jesus person. I was born and raised a Jew, but I consider myself more of a cultural Jew. I don't have any training or education in Judaism other than a very cultural thing. But I started questioning who I am. What is the self in relation to this internet world? This I'm a mother, I'm a woman in this culture that we're living in, which is a very precarious time. So all these, just to give you a little background of some of the things I was thinking about writing this book. God, what a huge thing and title, but it's kind of liturgical, the book, and a prayer of questions, I guess, really. So this first poem is the first poem in the book. It's a sonnet. It's called God is a Wishing Well. God is a wishing well, lit up in the parking lot of my heart. Your shiny pennies in place of bullets. Spoiled plans fell off the wagon. False starts. Back to where the bones dwell with the petals. I swept salt, blood, ether, ink, a prayer. The sky shot fireworks and fireflies. Each stare was a blink. Each flight brought closure. Too much time spent with the wolf and the owl. I looked for answers in limp brochures. Trauma was my life in a gun shell. Foul, I won't be a pogrom comet to burl the night. A time bomb by a bed of frill roses. The shadow of my echo was a kite. You want me to keep reading, or do you want
Please. I want you to read 2 or 3, and yeah, we'll talk a little bit then.
Okay.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Thinking about, I guess, this notion of who we are on the internet. I started thinking about, we put on a good face. Our vacations, we are the great things our kids do. We don't often show, the darker side, who wants to see the darker side? But of course, as a self, we have many sides. So I was thinking a lot about that, about being a writer and taking on the persona of other people, of other characters and who these other characters we take on as we navigate our way through the world. So this is called My Persona. I carried my persona in a brown paper bag. It held shreds of lint and one hair that the comb forgot. My persona has a pecking order. Its first name rhymes with self, always the last in line. My persona is filled with yearning. It shipped off on a garbage of barge and landed with a din in the witness protection program. My persona hid under a shamrock in Dumbo. My mural penned by a black gloved hand. It lay chalk flat on a red brick building mixed with saliva, turpentine, and cheap wine. My persona is not the marrying kind. Stroked sleek at the ready in leopard tights, shaking up a winter snow toy on a cold and stormy night. My persona thrives on buyer's remorse. I bet you can't blush and cry on command. My persona skipped the needle on a song when no one was home. It unhooked my bra in a photo booth in July, then sat numb on a teacup rim. My persona was never a sound sleeper. A dog barked in the distance of my persona's longing. Naked pet rock held my persona behind the curtains where loneliness dwells. My persona is filled with birdsong. It carries smiles in a jar. It gets so tired of my persona, decides to take matters into its own hands, holding a pillow down firm over breathing until one of us goes still.
Can I ask you a question about that poem? I don't want you to have to gloss it, but I guess I'm wondering about the origins of that poem. How did that poem come to be?
Um, well, thinking about this idea of self and who we are and who we're putting out to the world that we are in this social media world where we're many selves. I go on Instagram, I'm a self there. I come on Facebook and I'm another self there. And people are getting a facade of me. So I'm very curious about that whole idea of who we are and what our spiritual life is. I think if you're maybe my son's age, you have no recollection of this life pre-internet, but I really do. And so I'm often comparing them.
Yeah. As you were reading that poem, I Googled a quote. I couldn't remember the exact quote, but it was I just wanted to run it by you and see what you think of this. It's Oscar Wilde, actually. Um, Man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask and he will tell you the truth.
Yeah. Well, that's why we write.
Yeah.
I think people, it's interesting. I am very much a visual person. I write a lot in response to visual art. But I think people assume with poets that you're always telling the I truth as opposed to fiction writer, which is not the case. I'm taking on many personas in this.
Mm,
It's not always, it's a composite, of
yeah.
me. But I feel the mask is true because you can often tell the truth through a different guise
Yeah.
than your own.
I'm also fascinated to learn more about your decision to put the word God on the cover of your book, and to find out what I'm fascinated. Each week, I walk away from these meetings or these sessions with a sense of having been in a spiritual conversation with the writers, despite the fact that the word spiritual has never come up. And I'm curious what spirituality means to you, and how you think your poetry might be connected to that word.
Well, I think that's why I wrote this book, was to try to find out what it is to me. I don't think I found the answer. I mean, I kept trying to find, that poem that was going to give me an answer to it all. But I think I find that writing is questioning. And I don't really, that's kind of the pursuit of that question. And it changes. One of my philosophies is everything is context.
Mm,
And according to what context you're in, where you are in your life, everything changes and the way you look at things. So I think my idea of spirituality will continue to evolve.
mhm. As you were writing that book, did any bigger questions come up as you
Look at
say,
God,
you
is there?
well, I mean, yeah, that maybe led to your next project, or yeah, I'm wondering.
Um, my next project is working with some ekphrastic poems with a friend of mine, collaborating with photographs. We're both writing in response to photographs. And that kind of got me going writing, because putting out a book, as you know, is a lot of, goes from the creative thing to the marketing thing,
Mhm.
very different. And it's very hard for me personally. I feel like you go from this very introverted space to, trying to put yourself out there and sell a book. So it was hard for me to write, and that project has gotten me kind of writing some new poems.
Mhm. Well, I want to get you
So
reading
that's
again, but
good. Um,
what are you doing now to preserve or to make a sacred space for your writing, where do you do that where you disconnect from social media and from the internet, or how do you find that creative space given the many roles that writers and poets have now?
I just have to make it. I mean, there comes a point you just have to turn it all off. I was telling Juniper today, we talked on the phone, that I'm a person that stays up at 3 a.m. because there's that moment in that window where no one is expecting me to go anywhere, be anywhere, call anybody. And there's just that, 1 to 3 a.m. time. And I'm not always writing in that time, but I'm just at a point in life where everything I'm doing is writing now, even when I'm not writing. You're always preparing to write
Mhm.
in some way or another. And yeah.
One of the viewers tonight asked a question: could we ask Atkins to read God as a Shock Jock?
Oh, absolutely. I love getting a request. Well, I don't think I have to express too much who this poem is inspired by, but the last 4 years have been hell, and we've all endured it. So I'm hoping that the next 4 years are a little bit. They're going to be hard and heavy, of course, but I think brighter days ahead. I hope. God is a shock jock. You shroud us in fur-lined collars, disco heels and pistons to swag down long runways, as if belted up to tease out our fears. Have you let us scroll from the weeds to this fabric of faux grass, now cast green with a president's face? Mother Nature's ink can melt a snowball in hell. Awe and shock are the wave of the furniture. You're feeding this fire with televisions, flags draping coffins, even our delirium. Patriotic like a kid with a pocketful of tomatoes beaten to a pulp by a bully that is the whole town. Your shoelaces pull us closer into the earth. We are sardonic with dust and shame. We are only disposable income. Turn the dial and we're all ego, dead ringer of vertebra in the shape of a lonely room. Stout clocks are rattling off our names, hands caught in a rush hour of clouds. Meanwhile, the stars offer the takeaway. Love is a drug for which we were startled by a wishbone, a brink, a bullet, a blink at a canvas of Bruegel rooftops, a table set with a conspiracy of flowers.
Nice. Would you read a couple more poems for us now?
Sure. This poem is in couplets, and it's a little bit of a trigger warning. It's a sexual assault poem, and it's a poem basically a tribute to my mother too. And this book was dedicated to my mother and my grandmother. And it's got an epigraph by Anne Sexton. The epigraph is, I am a collection of dismantled almost. Anne Sexton. Mirror, mirror. There is a parcel of land where everything is true in reverse. Ribbon cutting ceremony into the mayor's grave plot, where Nana Ida is a shopper putting on her lipstick, shade 53, Maui in the moonlight, setting sail after the war of ideas. We're all headed for nasty weather or its opposite, like breakfast for dinner. I found a lone diner just off the grid. In a plate, I saw myself. I saw my mother back home, tweezing her eyebrows. Nylons behind her drying into leaves or grief itself. My cracked lips, homesick for a smile and a familiar meal. The waitress has a run in her stocking, like confidence in reverse. As when Gus, the bartender at the Ramada Inn, held my arms behind my back and touched my 16-year-old breasts. I felt my pimples stir into a hurricane in the town square. That mayor selling raffle tickets to the thinnest skin of dignity. The tip jar wrestled to the floor. With two birds perched, my mom pulled the tiniest stubborn hairs, as if twigs exhumed from her brow. Hard triumphs of pain held under the light. I hear Nana Ida's worry lines in my ears. I am my mother pulling out branches, the whole family tree. My face is the universe breaking off the smallest possibilities with each shard of self.
Cynthia, I came across a quote today by you that said, I felt like an outsider, which is probably why I am a writer. Can you talk about that? And maybe that the way in which artists, writers do occupy a space on the outside, but then maybe then also talk about the importance of community and building community and as an artist and a writer.
Yes, I remember that feeling so specifically from a very young age. I always felt like I was a witness. I was the outsider looking in very definitively as a child. That's what I felt where my place was. So I always felt like I was on the outside of the action, watching it and gazing at it, and maybe a vehicle for interpreting something in it. And I've always felt like I didn't quite fit into any one group. Groups always make me a little bit uncomfortable. And I feel that in every aspect of my life. I'm from Chicago, but I'm not really Chicagoan. I'm a Jew, but I'm really Jewish. And I live in Virginia, but I'm not really a Southerner. So, and I guess that's maybe my place as a writer. And that Tom Waits line where you don't really see things until you're someplace, I don't really see Chicago until I was in Virginia. And sometimes you have to be at the opposite place to see it. So maybe that's my place in the world, is not to really fit in, be a misfit. And I think to some extent, writers and artists are misfits. Whatever that
I'm aware that you grew up in a family of origin that had mental illness, and I guess I want to get to that topic as well. And also was curious if that maybe led to some of the feelings of being an outsider.
Yes, absolutely. My father was bipolar. We called it manic depression back then. And he would, he's my hero. I absolutely love him. And I don't think his illness defined him. But when he would go into kind of a manic state, he would be at a restaurant. My parents were divorced. He'd pick me up for Sunday, lunch, and he'd be the guy up talking to everybody in the restaurant. So I'm used to that. It was very seasonal. That's why I called my first book, Psyche's Weathers. I very much associated his manic part with the seasons. Winter was kind of set off his manic side. And then my older sister was schizophrenic, and she passed away a couple of years ago. And my whole family was very much defined by that piece of our life, a dynamic that revolved around illness. So I think I grok towards people who have, you know, a screw loose, and I'm one of them. I have my own issues with all of it, and but I'm interested in that. That's why I wrote my second book about kind of being a family member of dealing with mental illness and mental health as part of that dynamic, because it's not just that person, you know, it's a whole circle around you.
Could you maybe read something from that book, or just a poem about the topic we're discussing now? So,
Sure, absolutely. I thought I'd read, in this book, it was a long poem called Family Therapy. One time my family went to a therapy session to talk about all this stuff, which was kind of happening before, you know, there were textbooks, before Phil Donahue and Oprah. It was kind of the thing where this was going on in our life, and we didn't have all these talk shows talking to us about it, which we do now. My mom didn't know to talk to me about a boss hitting on me or doing, you know, things were different. I hope we're a little more enlightened now about a lot of this. But I grew up at a time where a lot of it was, you know, pushed under the rug, and you didn't talk about it, and it was there, and it was always on the topic, but we didn't have the language that we do today. So anyway, this poem is called Family Therapy, and it's throughout the book, Family Therapy 1, 2, 3, 4. This is Family Therapy 4. It is the thing we always fail to mention on all the forums, the despotic voices dancing off the charts and on the trail of our acrid ancestors. Haphazard and lorn, sniffing us out like cadaver dogs. Our chromosomes flirting on the cordless phone. Diseases of the heart and kidney are just the body's bric-a-brac, incorporeal or obscene. We are the doctor's worst unexplained nightmare. And we never speak of the endocrine glands, unsavory secretions passed down like the heirloom nobody even wants. We are a rogue nation, no country or comfort zone, inhospitable bedrooms where our parents detonated bombs, blamed the groping in-laws. Our family trait is to remember only the good times, like a last blown kiss at the door, but more like a breath blown over a bottle, forever haunting the offspring. Hush, we'll never tell. Yet deep down, we know the mind's pain is the last inconsolable and extra gene. Rabid dog in the schoolyard, mean and mad and frothing.
thank you. How did writing and poetry serve you to survive a confusing childhood? I mean, I hear you that it was you had a lot of love for your family, but it must have been confusing. And how did words help you through that time?
I think words were a kind of escape, of a way of understanding myself, where I fit in. When there's an ill person in your family, a lot of the attention goes to that person. It's kind of a hurricane. Um, and I wondered where I fit in. So maybe my writing was my place to go and tell my imaginary friend about my pain. I think it's always hard for me to think about writing about like my sister's pain. I always felt like I cannot, take on her thing. I had to write about it through my experience or a persona. But I think it's always a sticky wicket to, this kind of writing about other people and their own pain. So I had to find my way in to it, that I didn't feel like stepped on everybody else's toes.
Hmm.
I write about it in an iconic way. It's like it's my sister, but it's an iconic sister, I guess. You know what I mean?
Can you talk more about that? I've read interviews with you talking about the your ideas about writing about other people, especially other people's quote problems. And yeah, can you talk about your philosophy and how you approach that?
Um, William Carlos Williams said, no ideas, but in things. I Images are really important to me, metaphor, and I feel like they hold a lot of complexity. At least I always tell my students that symbols and images hold the complexity of life. So, and that's why I think I love poems, because poems depend on image, metaphor. Um, so I think I try to, like I said, find an iconic way in speaking from the we, and I'm not, honing in on my father and his intimate, sense of his own self. But as writers, we want to engage, of course, and understand that mind. That's just kind of who we are. Um, anyway, I think I'm not alone as a writer, that we wrestle with this probably our whole career, of how to approach, you know, the intimacy of somebody in their life, our own pain, writing through that. As a poet, I love having readers that don't know me personally, because they're not reading all these other things into it about my personal bio. Somebody, a friend of mine, knows my family. They're reading all these other things into the poems, where somebody who doesn't know me is just reading the poem on the page. And that gives me a lot of pleasure, because I think, again, context is everything. And my poems are a composite of life and experience. Not everything exactly happened in my life the way it does in a poem, you know? So my sister who might read it and go, well, that's really not, that was really my aunt, not my mother. But it's kind of like a dream. I think we write kind of like we dream. We're pulling a lot of different elements into our, art. It is an art anyway. It's not real life. It's art. But the reason we go to art, I think, as an audience, as a reader, is to help us understand our own predicaments, our own problems. And this other artist might not have the same exact problems I do, but the fact that they've questioned these complexities will help me in my own quest. And I think that's what art does for us.
Hmm. And in some of the poems you've read tonight, there's a definite psychological awareness of the many parts of us. Is there a sense of a true self that you ever get to and write from, or is it always a conglomeration of parts? So,
Um, I think I have many selves. I'm just still discovering. I mean, I'm the self that is the mother of my son. I'm the self that is the writer. I'm a self that is a wife, sister. I think all those selves are somebody a little bit different. And then there's all these people that I try to find, within myself. And I think I'm still discovering who I am in COVID-19. It's a different self than I would have been last year.
Yeah. I know you're a teacher. How do you teach your students to find their own writing voice?
Well, telling them to read a lot, read other writers, and experiment, try new things. One of the best teaching tools I have, I always love watching my students when I do this little exercise where I'll have them write like a paragraph in like first person. Remember your first day of school. And they'll sit and write 5 minutes, and they'll write about their first day of school. And I'll say, write sensory and let us smell it, and tell us the teacher had to run in her stocking, and let us see it. And then I'll have them read it aloud, and then I'll have them go back and read their piece in second person. And then I'll have them go back and read it in third person. And they will each hear completely different sound, mood, texture of their piece, and the way that it changes. Not that one's right or wrong, but one that is going to be right for their piece. And just little techniques like that little tricks. It's always exciting when you see a new writer trying something like that and discovering something.
Do you write with anybody in mind as your reader?
The poets, of course, who know about line breaks and enjambments. It's frustrating to me. I know I have a lot of layman readers who try to read my work. Sometimes they're like, I don't really understand it. And I always want to give them a little lesson on just how to read a poem. When we write prose, we type, tells us, ding, go to the margin. But poems, you're deciding where the line breaks, and you're jamming a line. And there's just certain things, if you're not a poet, you're maybe not partly to, but a really good poem should impart to anybody.
Yeah. Would you read some more for us, please?
I'll read probably one more poem.
Yep.
I'm sure your time's all getting limited for Sunday night.
Mhm.
I've probably read this poem before, but one of the poems that I enjoy reading or thinking about, kind of like a bookmark of my book, is one of the poems, and it's kind of an elegy. Somebody a writer that I met here on the internet. I never met her in person. Her name happened to be Susan Elby. She was just a very lovely poet, and I enjoyed getting to know her here. But I realized I never heard her voice. The things that when you meet somebody in the room, or talk to, as I did Juniper today, just talking and hearing her voice, you immediately know somebody in a different way. So the limited way that we know people, and yet I think on the internet, there's still a fingernail, a thumbprint, an aura of people that we come to love and feel close to, and connect to. So this is kind of an elegy. She died, Susan did, and I just realized some of the things that made me think about the internet and what it is about all these people we connect to every day, who are somewhat strangers. And one of the things I guess I just wanted to mention is that as a kid growing up in Chicago, one of the things that I really was mesmerized by, I guess it was like my TJ Eckelberg moment, was this icon. Can anybody see it? Probably can't. I'll hold it up kind of close. It's the Magic Kiss sign in Chicago. And when I was a little girl driving with my parents in the backseat of the car, I knew when we saw those lips, it was lit up at night, going downtown to visit like my grandparents. I really felt like that was entering the city, and it was just kind of a magical moment to see these big red lips lit up. So that comes up in the poem. I always wanted to use those Magic Kiss lips in my poem. And anyway, here's the poem that it ended up in. thanks for coming out, everybody, tonight. And Brad, thanks for doing this. I know it's so much work. Juniper, Carmel, I just really appreciate you're asking me to do this and come out tonight. And thanks for listening. This is called When the Internet is the Loneliest Place on the Planet. Blow by blow, we gave up scents and sunsets to hold our heads in a screen and gawk in our sleep. My blind leading your blind to where the last light is driven to be warehoused. I learned to whisper over graves, to measure the heft of my breast to the soul that lay in that soil devoid of breath. When push comes to shove, when enough is more than enough, when your face sees itself snatched by the swarm of names, pell-mell. I'm just parched for a whiff of clean laundry, a bed made from the cheapest smoky scents of its last spent residents, clinging to pastures where the lovesick stargazers go. Yesterday, I mourned a friend whom I've never laid eyes on, never heard the bricks in her voice, or saw her mouth, a gaudy brothel of accents, straight out of the Bronx by way of Chicago, my birth town. I was born to know that train whistles record the distance of our loneliness. I drifted to sleep smelling the pepper spray my parents shot at each other in the front seat. It was my own garden on the highway under the Magicist sign, where I could cry all night long in the damp arms of strangers. Each car holding that piece of self that looks for others, popping out of a hole like a fox or a wolf, forcing you to see your breath. Flick the light switch into the dark classroom in the planetarium of stars.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you being here tonight. I was reminded of another quote. I kind of collect quotes, I guess. So the quote was by a physicist from India named V.V. Raman. I think he said, "Poetry is to the human condition what a telescope or a microscope is to science." And I just want to thank you for being here tonight. And I definitely feel the words and these moments together as a really delving deeper into the human condition. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out and connecting, and Writing for Peace is doing some wonderful things out there in the lit world. for youth and for connecting us as a community. So thank you all for doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Can you hold your book up one more time and tell people about it?
Absolutely. DM me if you should want a signed copy. It's called Still Life with God. It's published by St. Julian Press, published last March, and it can be bought through me or through any of the internet sources, or buy it at your local bookstore, even better. They can order it for you anytime you can shop local. Bookshop, I recommend that, they are trying, their MO is to help local bookstores. So bookshop.org is a great place to order.
Great. And let me tell you the viewers tonight about the upcoming readers. So on December 13th, we've got Scott Nadelson. He's a writer of mixed genre. And on December 20th, David Ulan, editor and writer. And I want to welcome anyone who wants to stay on to chat for a few minutes with Cynthia. Are you available for a few minutes to chat?
Okay. Sure.
Well, great. Why don't we just open up, Juniper, if you would. And many thanks again to Juniper, the producer and this show, and Carmel, the founder of Writing for Peace. And I'm just really grateful for both of them to create this space for us each week and to promote it, and Juniper to just organize all of this, and she's the soul of this show. So thank you, Juniper.
Yes. Thank you.
Everybody has, thank you, Brad. Thank you. Everybody has the ability to unmute themselves now. So if you would like to speak, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions or just say hello. This is kind of our after party reading since we can't get together and rub shoulders.
I found the poems very compelling. And you said that you were interested in ekphrastic poetry. And I was wondering if there are any literary or artistic movements that you have affinity to, like surrealism or poetry of insanity, painters like Magritte maybe, or
yes,
or poets such as Artaud. Yeah, that's it.
Definitely the Bauhaus and the Expressionists. Francis Bacon was I know he's kind of a horrific artist, but I love his work. It's dark. So yeah, John Ashbery is a poet that
I asked in my right.
Has a lot of writes a lot about art. So I feed a lot on visual art and music.
And your poems generate those images, sometimes surreal, sometimes real.
Thank you.
That come up in that painting, right?
I kind of think actually that poets are more like painters than they are like fiction writers. That there's something more like a poem and a painting are more similar in terms of how you receive the images and the information. It's not like a linear thing, like maybe a narrative is, like a story, beginning, middle, end. I think a poem and a painting have more of a synesthesia, senses are mingling. So I guess I have an affinity to like visual art for that reason, in the way that you come to the images. And I think poetry is very similar.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
I just really enjoyed the realness of your being, and that the internet obviously has not stripped you from, should I say, our older way of looking at things in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And when the pandemic hit, I thought, oh my God, everybody's going to be calling each other on the phone. We're going to be talking all the time. This is going to be great. I mean, wow, we're going to catch up with everybody because you know, I had a retail store, and for 34 years, every day, everybody threw that 4-letter word at me. Hi, how are you? Oh, I'm really busy. I'm really busy. I'm like, oh, stop with the busy. I don't have that store, and I'm home in the pandemic since March. Since the presidential candidate election, I was a election judge. I said, I have to go home. I can't be exposed to any of this. I've been home since March, and my phone does not ring. I have to go on the internet to email or Facebook and say, do you have some time we could talk on the phone?
I
And
love the telephone.
it's a
Actually.
miracle. It's a miracle. I mean, I grew up with all my aunts and my grandma. Everybody had their little telephone seat, and you'd go sit, and they would talk on the phone, and the men in the house would be like, "Ah, for crying out loud, are you still on the phone?" And I'm like, I almost feel like I need to just pretend. Oh, excuse me, I've got a call. No one's there. So your book about God is like, it's a way, it's a means of calling on this greater sense that we know we have to talk to somebody. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And I just got to throw one line that when you wrote, the bully that is the whole town, it's like, that's living life. That is living life. Thank you very much, Cynthia.
Thank
Mwah.
you. Thank you for being so specific about your listening. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's hard to listen to work and get that. So I
I
appreciate
didn't miss a beat of yours.
that. Thank
Did
you.
not miss a beat of it. Perfect.
Lovely. Is anybody else who's still here want to say hello? And before we close out for the evening, just for a brief time. I know we have a few more, handful more. Oh, now they're dropping away.
Okay.
Didn't mean to chase anybody away. I just wanted to offer.
You didn't. It's the, yeah, it's
Thank you all for coming out. And Juniper, thanks for all the work you're doing for this. It's a lot, and you do it so effortlessly and graciously. I really enjoyed hearing you read my poem the other day too. That was
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I believe that Carmel started something beautiful here a long time ago, and she's gathered some really wonderful people, and it is an honor to work with her and to help bring people and raise voices. And part of our mission statement is imagining the future we want to see, like through the writing, through the work we're doing, you know, creating a future we want to see. So as I visualize people I want to bring, they represent the future we want to see. So thank you for doing your part, Cynthia.
I'm so honored. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you.
And
Woohoo.
thank you for everybody who joined us.
Thank you.
Good night.
Be well.
Thanks, Bill.
You're all
Thank you.
Phil. Thank you, Carmel.
Thank you, Carmel. You're
Oh,
beautiful.
thanks, Carmel.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thank you.
Bradley.
Good night.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.